Retro Rebel is brought to you by templeofgeek.com, your one-stop shop for all things geek. You can find all of our episodes and fulfill your sci-fi, fantasy, and geek culture-related needs at templeofgeek.com. Welcome to the Retro Rebel Gamecast, where we discuss gaming and related topics. Retro Rebel is released Fridays, and you can find this episode and much more by heading to templeofgeek.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. You can even find us on Facebook and Instagram at Retro Rebel Podcast for exclusive content and to see what else we're up to. My name is Stacy, and with me, as always, is my fellow Rebel co-host, Amanda.
Hello.
Hello, yes. So, one thing I think is good to mention is we've actually done this for 10 years. Did you know that? Have you been tracking that?
I have not. It just is a part of life, so I haven't really thought about it.
Well, and as such, life happens, and we've continued to sort of, I think, do this the way that we want to, and I'm excited. It's funny that it has been 10 years. It doesn't seem like that. I don't think we don't really track things necessarily even by years. So a lot of our lists for game of the year has games from previous years on it. So it's not like we're using the current year as sort of a guideline for measuring anything in particular. But I've always enjoyed that. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that small piece of information that people may be interested. We've been doing this for a long time, really. But so what have you been up to?
Well, I have sort of cashed all in on Sea of Thieves. So I have all the ships that you can get now.
Wow.
And I've really focused on giving them fun 90s/2000 rapper names and puns. So all of my ships are puns. In the game, there are 3 types of ships that you can get. There's a sloop, there's a brigand, and there's a galleon. And so my sloop is called Sloop There It Is.
This one I knew.
So. My new brigand is Briggy Smalls.
Okay.
And I've got a galleon called G-Unit.
Nice. Very nice.
I really enjoyed naming them and decorating them, probably more than anything else. Been playing it with a guild crew with some of my mates, and yeah, I think when you're playing it solo or, playing with people that it obviously is a fun game. I think I made a mistake jumping right into a pug environment without even really knowing how to play or doing the tutorial, and that did not do me any favors the first time round. Now that I've, learned to play it in a safe space, I've been enjoying it. So apologies to Sea of Thieves fans when I definitely slagged off that game for many years.
It's been a full 180.
Yeah, we do revisit games sometimes, and
That's
sometimes
right.
We're wrong about stuff, and we can change our opinion as we have and are want to do from time to time. I think we've managed. Do you reckon this is our 3rd or 4th recording of the year? So we're really consolidating our opinions.
That's right. We're covering a lot of ground in a small period of time. Lots of stuff happened.
Once per quarter, What about you? What have you been playing?
Honestly, I've really been watching a lot of video game content more than anything else, especially during October. That's, the Halloween season and the spooky season. And so I watch a lot of creepypasta videos or videos of spooky secrets and hints about games and stuff. And the Scary Game Squad is something I've mentioned on the show before, and they often have them. And I don't know if you're familiar with Indie Mouse.
Mm-mm.
Okay, Indie Mouse is, I think, a YouTuber from Australia and does a lot of sort of spooky games, especially during the month of October. And so I've been watching a lot of that. But in between that, the games that I've been playing, and the game in particular I've been playing is still Baldur's Gate. I continue to go back to Baldur's Gate 3. Much like you, you're sort of all in on Sea of Thieves. I think this is my 5th or 6th character. In fact, I've downloaded it. I have it on PC, and now I have it on PlayStation 5.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So I can play with some of my friends. So this will be the first time I'm actually doing a campaign where I'm playing with some of my friends on PlayStation. So they can join me as their character and it's a lot like doing a virtual D&D session in the world of Baldur's Gate. So
I love it.
yeah. So we haven't actually started it. In fact, I've spent if you have if you right now if you download Baldur's Gate 3 on your PlayStation, you get 2 hours and you can download it for free and you get 2
Right.
free hours to play it.
Nice.
It took me a little over an hour just to build my character.
Well, yeah, that is typical. That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, and I probably could have taken 2 hours just because I was trying to get it just right. You see your character's face. Unlike a lot of games, there are a lot of games that you put some work into your character, then you never see their face again
Yeah,
because
which
it's in
is
that first
annoying.
person view. Skyrim like that. But
Yeah.
but then you've got, this game where you see your character's face all the time. It's even disappointing when decisions you've made have altered the look of your character,
Yeah.
And anyway, so I've put a lot of effort into that. But that's the game I've put well over 400 or 500 hours into that game this year alone. So I'm not necessarily proud of that. I'm not sure I really wanted to say that number out loud. Some of that may just be me pausing the game and then stepping away for a few hours and coming back and playing it. So that probably inflated the number a little bit. But
So funny. No, I do. I mean, I really liked it. We recently consolidated down to one console. We had a PS5 for a while, but to be fair, there wasn't enough games coming out that we both wanted to play, so we've gone down just to the Xbox. But that means, sadly, I've lost my Baldur's Gate save. So Q Q
oh
Q.
no.
I know. So might go back to it in the future, maybe on PC. But at the moment, we're Xbox Series S only, the littler one, which
Right.
is great, and it has everything. We've been playing Sea of Thieves, and Game Pass is really super good. It is getting more expensive, but it still has good selection, so I'm happy to continue paying for it. I just think about the fact of how much it costs versus how much just one game costs. And to be honest, if you're going to play 2 games a year, then it's worth it. So,
Right.
and I will. So that's sort of why I haven't canceled it yet. But for this episode, as the end of the year is, upon us and
Honest.
Thanksgiving is literally next week, I wanted to just generally have some wider thoughts about the gaming industry and, things like a retrospective look at things that we used to be thankful for and maybe might be things of the past going forward. I'm feeling a little nostalgic. I don't know about you. Sort of like a pumpkin pie for the soul moment. Thinking about first an attempted rebrand, at least by a couple media outlets, of the idea of live services as a forever game. I think that's a really interesting, and they're saying that this is very much a Gen Z thing, and this is how they're positioning it as a cheap to start, ongoing investment sort of thing, like your Fortnites and that sort of thing, where they're always evolving it. It's always fresh, but it's more about the constant continuity of this game in your life. I think it's something that, WoW and the other MMOs did sort of accidentally do, but it definitely hasn't been very intentional. And I'm not sure how I feel about a constantly reinvented and updated game without end as the sort of new go-to experience. I mean, we know that live services has been the thing for many years, but you and I think, are very much of the vein where we like first person single player narrative experiences, even at the very least, a choose your own adventure style RPG with different endings, but still having an ending. I'm feeling a bit nostalgic for games that have an ending at the moment, knowing that now that I've achieved all the ships in Sea of Thieves that I wanted to achieve, unless they put out a new ship, I know that my attention span for continuing to play this will not last. It is at its core like a grindy game, and as fun as it is to play with my friends, we're all adults and have limited time, and that's not really, something that I could do. So what do you think about the concept of the rebrand of live service titles as forever games, with the idea that especially the new generation of gamers will purchase a title at a low price and then play and constantly invest in it forever as like a social construct.
Wow. Honestly, I think I'm of two minds when it comes to this because on one hand, as somebody I have an active World of Warcraft subscription. That's a game who's recently come upon their 20th anniversary. There are people that are playing this game right now that weren't born when it came out, and I played it from the beginning, and so seeing how it's sort of changed over time, the fact that it is one of those games that really doesn't end, that it will continue as long as the servers, I think when you do it well, when it's done really well, which requires an incredible amount of funding, people on the back end of it, right, putting it together, all of the folks that are responsible for putting that together, to do it well, to create a world that feels lived in, and that didn't happen overnight. Like World of Warcraft didn't happen overnight, so that was something that sort of it was a game sort of, and the limitations of the time. It's why you had to walk everywhere. It's why you couldn't fly until much later. It's why the world wasn't all that big at first, which sort of condensed people into certain areas, and it made it to where it felt lived in. And they were kind of building off the backs of Ultima and some of these other games that sort of came before it, and oh my goodness, EverQuest, and then now what we're seeing in this rebranding, or sort of, to me, it seems like a shell game. It's not really changing anything. You're creating sort of vapid experiences. And that's ultimately what I would like to not see happen, is don't just change the name of it. I'm okay with the concept of these forever games as a portion of the games, as sort of a genre of the games, and then when they're done really well. I think that a lot of them are done with not with the best interest of the player or of the consumer in mind, but for the bottom line. And so you create a lot of these experiences. A lot of these free to play games are predatory, and I believe that's actually the majority of them. It's sort of difficult to find the really well made ones that are contained experiences, or at least an experience that, even though it's going to continue on, and it will continue on long after you're there, you have to be online all the time. This idea, or this model, that games have to be connected to the internet, they always have to be, which is sort of, to your point about the nostalgia, reminds me of a time when games came out completely done, ready to
Yeah.
go to play on day one, instead of selling us an empty game that's broken at best when it's released, only to patch it on day one and then to actually add the content over time. That's, to me, that's not in the best interest of the consumer. It's a violation of the trust that I think that we have with the companies that are making them, and in the end, it's not best practice for for gaming, or the consumption of games, or for the people that make them, and just in general. So I think it's a decent idea. It's an okay idea. I think that it has a place in gaming, this idea of these games that go on forever. But I think it's just a new coat of paint on an issue that's going to continue to be a problem, which is these games that end up being released unfinished, without content, to make money initially and then shut down the servers. It's
Mm.
been the case on games even released recently with the PlayStation, where
Yeah.
they had this whole roadmap of all these live service. So I think the reason they're changing it is because live service has bad connotations. So just change the name of it, and then you're not associating this with this game, which is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so some of, and I'll link the piece in the comments, but some of the research that Sky News and Nvidia did found that last year in-game purchases accounted for 67% of global games revenue. It dwarfs buying the game itself, which
Right.
is crazy. And of that, a huge proportion of it is avatars. It's 54 billion on character cosmetics alone. That is such a different shift. And then they dove into the research to try to figure out, okay, so from the 16 to 30-year-olds, which is the new generation of gamers, which is so embarrassing that we're nowhere near that up, right? And then the older gamers who are 51 plus. So we're not even I'm not even accounted for. But basically,
Neither am I.
yeah. So basically, the older gamers in general, their reasons for playing games is to get an escape or me time, whereas younger people use it to make new friends and socialize. I would rather die than make a new friend on a game. Like, I don't need to talk to anyone. I just want to crack on. I want to experience this on my own and like leave me alone. But that's, of course, quite different. So they're saying that because of the domination in global sales and the change of the buyers, which are under 30, and their desire to socialize and have the way their avatar looks in a game in front of others define a piece of their identity, it's, I think it's making me a bit nostalgic for what it was. I mean, I remember how much your avatar look was important in World of Warcraft, and I'm sure still is today. So I think maybe when you're younger, that plays a bigger part anyway. But also, I think people are losing the enjoyment of escape into a fantasy world that isn't influenced by the sound of anyone else's voice in your ears, where you're experiencing the art and the story they want to tell you in its own form, directly, you with whoever the artists were that created that for you, more like a Baldur's Gate and less like listening to people scream in PUBG. Like, for me, I enjoy the former rather than the latter. But I think you are right. Like, it's an interesting change, and it can be done right. There are games that do this very well. And then there are games that sort of are DOA and were just a cash grab, etc. But I do think we will see more of these forever games, and they'll be pitched even harder as like a lifestyle, like something to define yourself by for decades to come, which is an interesting shift. It's sort of doubling down on the WoW mindset and being an MMORPG gamer to like an nth degree.
Well, to your point, I think, and are you familiar with Bo Burnham by
Yeah,
chance?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So if you've seen any of his interviews over the last 8 years, 7 or 8 years, one of the key points that he continues to iterate on is this idea that social media companies, gaming companies included, because everything's integrated right now. So social media, video games, I mean, you take a picture while you're playing on the PlayStation, I can automatically upload that to Instagram or wherever else just so people can see what I'm doing. Well, the fact that all of this is integrated is it's impossible to tease it apart, and I think that's by design. That as this evolves, as social media evolves, then gaming is trying to evolve to see how we can integrate, because all of it is, in both words, an attempt to sort of capitalize on your attention, because we've conquered all the land. Now it's a matter of conquering all of your attention, because that's where the money is. There was money in expanding and conquering and being, sort of developing the world. Well, now the virtual world is effectively endless. What's not endless is your attention. How do we maximize and make money off of your attention? And that is by trying to keep you engaged as much as possible. The whole grinding experience where I've got to get in, log in every day. It's sort of like my job away from my job. So they find ways, and there's psychological tricks to fix you. We've talked about that over time too. So I think there is a way. I mean, before video games, we had books. Before books, there was usually some way or form for us, media wise, to entertain ourselves. And so you weren't always learning. You weren't always being productive. It's okay to have these sort of vices and these things that we want to do and enjoy and spend our time doing. And I think gaming companies do it well sometimes. I sort of long for that time where we could appreciate a game. I actually was a big fan of Mass Effect and the original ending. I didn't care. I really loved the three games and didn't get hung up on the fact that every single decision I made did not affect the end. I was like, well, the end is going to be the end, but like the decisions and how it affects you in the minutia was what was interesting to me, and that who made it to the end, and my decisions affected who made it, and who would stay with me, and your romantic options and all of that stuff. That was really fascinating to me. I can't change the end of a book, but you still read the book and see all the twists and turns, and that book in and of itself is worth reading and even worth revisiting when it's done well. And I think games are the same. I think it's it's sort of a statement of the times that all of the social media influences, the short tidbits, the reels,
Yeah.
All of this affects the way people consume media. And I think gaming falls in line with that. That, to reach that particular population, you've got to have a game that I can come in and do just a little bit and leave, because that's effectively the sort of time frame that they're dealing with. That's as long as they've got to keep their attention. Come in, change the look of your character, do a few battles, do click all your things and the thing with the thing, and then you've done your stuff for today. And then you can come back to it tomorrow. And that is obviously a viable form of gaming. It's falls under the umbrella. It's not something that I'm particularly interested in, but I see the market. I get it. I
Yeah.
just it's definitely not for me, and it's not the type of game I want to play. And I think in the end, the reason it doesn't work is because it doesn't have that substance. Baldur's Gate 3 to me is one of the greatest games that's ever been created because of how much freedom you have in the game, and the game is self-contained. Like, they do patch it, they've patched it, but they're about to be done working on it altogether. Like, they're not going to patch it anymore, and they're not changing anything else. There's no more, there's nothing else going to be, it will be complete. And it does have an ending, has many endings, right?
Yeah.
And it was a labor of love by a lot of people that really understood what it took to create this immersive role-playing experience in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And so it just shows you, not only can it be done, it can be very lucrative, which this is not the only example. So I think you and I sort of are on the same page in terms of like the games that we like. Definitely not knocking this other genre of gaming per se. Just I am absolutely knocking it when it's done poorly. When it's obviously not done in the best interest of the gaming community, the people. It's predatory at best,
Mm.
and that's the kind of stuff that I definitely would like to see less of. But yeah, that is another very large contingency of the gaming population, is these shorter forever, and I see the draw in just the cosmetics alone, and why people would want to include that. Look, just look at how much money they're making off of something like that.
Yeah, they're not doing bad with that.
No.
Well, that sort of, I think, brings me to my next idea, which is surrounding the criticism of Dragon Age Veilguard as a piece of woke propaganda. And I would first like to say that I think, in general, if you get into the habit of playing games for their socialization elements, then you're going to be perhaps more surprised or even more affected by your own echo chamber when you play a game which is trying to tell you whatever the artist who created it wanted to tell you.
Right.
So I think as more, especially younger people, experience live service games instead of first person or single player narratives, they're never confronted by any story ideas, really. They play with people who probably have very much the same opinions and ideas as them. And then when they do play a game that has some sort of confronting narrative, they are extra pissed off about it because it's so unusual and whatever. So Dragon Age the Veilguard is getting criticism from things that it already had in the past, like, the ability to be whatever kind of character you want and generally be as pansexual or not that you wanted to be, which has always been the case, but many people did not play the older games because they were not alive to play them or were too young to play them. So they wouldn't know that anyway, which is the criticism which is the commentary that some of its development team has said, that said, if you didn't think that Dragon Age was, liberal leaning, you've obviously not a fan, because Dragon Age has always been very be who you want to be sort of thing from that regard. But there is, and I must say, a very ham-fisted, series of dialogues around a character being non-binary, including with a semi-performative apology. And it is patently not well written. Regardless of what sort of statement you were trying to make in fantasy and sci-fi and other genres like this, many people have made a better argument than this, and they've been more subtle in a way that allows you to think about it in the context of the character that you're playing, etc. I mean, Star Trek comes to mind. The Orville has done this better, non-binary, trans, etc. Those sort of things have existed long, long, long before the Veilguard in terms of like narrative things that showrunners and game people have wanted to create and make. For whatever reason, they allowed this sort of segment with your character and another character and a performative apology to go ahead, even though it is inarguably not well written, right? It's not done well. I don't think that it is anything less than jarring. However, I don't think that trying to tell a modern allegory in whatever method is something that doesn't happen, because it happens all the time, especially in sci-fi, but fantasy also. So I'm not willing to accept that criticism. And then just generally the people are like, keep your politics out of my games. I mean, that has nothing to do with it because life is inherently political. So, most people will have beliefs that span the entire spectrum of any particular political party. So I think people don't necessarily understand the difference between like concepts being presented in a game and it aligning with a specific political party. And in the context of the recent American election and the UK riots, I do think a sort of weird anti-tolerant streak and maybe even overt white supremacy and misogyny themes are starting to just sort of crop up everywhere, whereas previously I think they were a little bit more underground. I would say that I don't think that the criticism that Veilguard is getting is totally unwarranted, because Dragon Age as a franchise has always done storytelling very well. Its characters have always been very interesting, and every piece of sexual content, etc., that they've always put in, I felt, at least personally, has always been very well done. And they've had gay characters before, and like blah blah blah, and they've done these sort of narratives before. I think that unfortunately, the exact dialogue and the exact situation, which includes a push-up contest that they decided to use to talk about the concept of non-binary, was not well executed. And
I think I saw that scene. I think I saw
yeah,
that. Yeah.
it opens it up for even more criticism in a time where people's like open intolerance of other people's choices is really on display. So do you think that the concept of forever games and the social non-narrative values of games could be exacerbating these sort of more confronting narratives that people are starting to see? Or do you think that it's the political climate and just people feel more comfortable saying they don't like?
I think it's probably a little bit of many of those things. I think that the ubiquitous nature of social media and media consumption plays a major role in this, and that you're constantly sort of washed over with information all the time, and if you're sort of in the gaming sphere and you lean any particular direction, that the algorithm works that way. You click on a thing, you spend any time on it, that's what you're going to get more of. And then you're just going to keep seeing this thing. And then you think this thing is everywhere. It's all the time. That's all you're seeing, because some AI on one of these websites has consumed it, regurgitated it, and spit it in 50 different directions. And now it does seem like it's everywhere for you.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like me, who's sort of unplugged from that stuff, is like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't see any of this stuff. I also think that one of the, like, to me, a situation like this, especially in academics, if I see an issue, I don't try to go paint over it. I go to the root and try to see if I can figure out what the issue is so we can pull it up by the root or figure it out and fix the problem, not redirect it or call it something else like forever games, So I think that when you associate your identity with whatever this particular idea is, then anytime that idea is challenged or in any way, then what originally seemed as an idea of tolerance ends up attacking you personally, where that wasn't the intention. And that's merely how we're filtering that information because of the way we associate ourselves with that, if that makes sense. It's the idea of identity politics, and in particular. And so, if they're a Democrat, anything they say can't be valid. Or if they're a Republican in the United States, anything they say can't be valid because I'm a Democrat or whatever. Um, Instead of weighing it without completely objectively based on the merit of the idea, or based on the story, as you're saying. So if there's this situation where you have, let's see, just the idea of I don't know, okay, so let's take Veilguard for instance. I haven't played the game. I'm sort of familiar with what you're talking about. I've seen the scene, but I haven't heard the dialogue. I do know a game that we mentioned earlier, Mass Effect, did non-binary better, or at least with very little effort with the Asari. Okay, so the Asari, it's assumed already that they're, and I don't even know the term that they use, but basically they are male and female, effectively. So it didn't really matter who you created as a character. And in fact, in none of the dialogue did it ever really matter what character you created, because there was always a pathway for romance with any of the characters. And it wasn't ham fisted. It was very natural, in
Yeah.
fact, in Baldur's Gate, it's actually pretty funny how some of the characters come across as, like, I would assume, and this is my perspective based on knowledge prior to some of the patches, is like Gale was like the thirstiest character in the game, you know,
Yeah.
and regardless of the character you're playing, I mean,
Yeah.
he
He's like,
throws
he's
himself
there
at
for
you.
you. Yeah, he's there.
He's there. He's there for you. And but to me, it's the game, you're advancing to me, that's just the progress of life. And it felt earned.
Hmm.
Everybody wasn't exactly the same cookie cutter. The pathway to romance with all of them was not the
Hmm.
same.
Yeah, I think some of the criticism, I mean, what is so funny is that I imagine people who are a little bit more right-leaning would not be as gracious in the same regard. But like, I can accept that it's not well written. I can also accept I've seen non-binary stories done better. The Star Trek Next Generation androgynous episode specifically comes to mind. That's probably one of the most powerful non-binary narratives. Do you know what I mean? About how
Right,
you should let people be who they want to be, and you shouldn't try to correct them out of what you think should,
right,
which I think is sort of generally the point. I think a criticism of this is that because there's an element of player choice, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't any obvious way to not acknowledge their non-binariness, and this is what people are quite upset about. I mean, that's an oversight, because if it were me and I told you that I, whatever I am, a woman, and then you were like, no, I think that you're a man or whatnot, then I'd be like, cool, we're never going to hang out again. Like, I just
right,
want you to know we're just never going to hang out again. Like, they definitely should have put that option so that people can see what the real side effect of ignoring what people's agency are in your life, for how they, if you refuse to call someone by their name and they've told you a million times, or you continually spell it wrong or whatever, they're not going to hang out with you anymore.
right,
So,
right.
I think that the devs have missed a trick here, because you definitely should be able to ignore what this PC says, and they go, do you know what? Your values don't align with mine, and I'm out. So I'll see you.
Right. And that could, I guess that could go either way. I mean, just in all fairness, either, if that's what you wanted to do, in as long as within the spirit of the game, it makes sense narratively, or it makes sense, like, all of it should make sense. I mean, in the Hogwarts Legacy of Hogwarts, whatever, the game, the Harry Potter game,
Hmm.
there's a trans character in the bar. Well, you don't, it's not overtly, I mean, it is, you're aware of it, but it's like, if you were not really paying close attention, it might have gone over your head. It's not fundamental to the story, though. Like, it doesn't change the narrative. To me, it would bring everything to a screeching halt for you to stop the story to tell me that. so that we could start the story again instead of weaving it seamlessly into the story, making it make sense. And if it's not necessary for the purpose of the story, then you may not even come across that part of dialogue, or you may not come because it didn't matter in the story. It matters to this person and their journey, but it's not about that person and their journey. It was about you as the character and your journey in there. So if and again, I think it's important to be able to look at it objectively. The problem is in those spheres where you're able to sort of cast your opinion on a matter recklessly without any sort of oversight or to be checked in any particular way. There's no balance to it. It's just send it out into the ether and let it do what it does without really having someone else put eyes on that before you put it into the world, I guess. And that's generally how things happen on Twitter or in, the YouTube comment section or, in Reddit where,
Yeah.
or any of these other places where people can sort of congregate and create their own echo chambers, supporting their own sort of potentially negatively biased opinions on things and perpetuate that. And unfortunately the real conversations and proper dialogue doesn't happen in those circles. I think it's something like this where you can look at it from an educated I mean just an objective, semi-informed perspective, and try your best to just look and say, look, man, this is what the artists were looking for. Man, they kind of missed the mark on this particular instance, but the game's good, or it's not, whatever,
Yeah.
But at the very least, I
It's just
get what they
so
were
funny,
trying to
like
do.
people seem, and I hate to use the word triggered because that just using that word will like trigger people, but
Right,
like they seem so triggered by the idea that you need to like choose what pronouns that your character will have. Like this is progress forward. There was a
right,
time when the vast majority of protagonists for games were just straight up men, where
right,
I never had the choice to play as a girl character, even if I wanted to. Do you know, like
right,
do we really want to go are we really going back to that? Like I want people to make as weird of a character as they want to make. I mean, go full Kendall down there. I don't care. Do you know,
right.
like if that is what you see as the vision and the story and how you want to experience it for your character, then like you should be able to do that. If you want to be a lady with like a mohawk and shaved sides, like do you know what I mean? I just don't
Right.
understand the like righteous indignation or whatever. Sure, was it absolutely ham-fisted? Sure, but media of all sorts, games as well, have been making moral, political, societal statements since as long as they've been around. You
Well,
know,
and I think if you, let's say, for instance, that there's a book about, I mean, like there are books that people read for their controversial nature, and then there are people that are like, you know what, because that book's controversial, I'm not interested in reading it. I don't want to do that. You hear a game's got concepts in it you're not interested in. The protagonist does this or this is, then don't play it, or don't. I understand that people want to be the whole idea of outrage culture. They just want to be upset about something. There are a lot of games. I don't want to play Star Wars Outlaws because Ubisoft made it, but I also had my inclination that it was going to be sort of broken in areas. It was going to be a lot of fetch quests. It was going to be this open world where nothing was happening. And from what I understand, all of that is true. All of that is true about the game, and still haven't played it.
excellent.
And
Well done holding out.
I know I'm holding out, but that was my understanding about it, and that sort of was my take and my personal perspective. I don't knock anybody else that's interested in playing it or that pays money because that's supporting Ubisoft and whatever else they do. Man, if you have an iPhone, then shame on you already. If that's what you're talking about, because that was made by a child in another country. So I mean, you
Yeah.
have to understand where are you drawing the line in your social where commentary and what you're going to where you want to be outraged,
Yeah,
because
I think
plenty to be outraged
the
about.
criticism of Dragon Age shouldn't be that it's woke. It's always been woke. It should be that
Right.
this scene is badly done and
That
done
should be
better.
hey, they should have written this better. And there's the criticism. That's what should be said. And you're right. And there are so many. Almost every game nowadays could be considered woke by definition if you're just talking about the option to romance who you want to and create the character that you want to and pursue all the exact same things regardless of the gender that you selected. So That's pretty standard in almost every RPG at this point. And there's for that in that regard, there's plenty to be upset about if people wanted to be. So I
Yeah.
just haven't played Veilguard because it completely changed from the game that I thought it was originally going to be.
Do you know what's so funny about that, though? I've looked at the graphics, and they don't look as bad as the advert. So now I'm very confused.
Right.
I think that they might have.
Graphics look good, actually.
Yeah, the graphic, but in the Veilguard advertisement, it looked like cartoony and terrible. Like, why does it? It
It
doesn't
was
look
like
like that at all.
Fortnite-ish, like a darker Fortnite.
Yeah,
And
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't seem like it looks like that at all in gameplay. So I probably will pick it up at some point. Just
yeah,
not. I'm gonna wait because I would love to give them the opportunity to address that and do that scene better. Like
right.
in general, I think they could. I think it's an opportunity. I don't know. If I was them, I don't know if I would say, well, if you don't like woke, then you're not a fan of whatever. That's probably not the thing to do. It's maybe to be like, oh, do you know what? Your criticism that this is ham-fisted is actually pretty legitimate. So what we're going to do is we're going to like retool that and be more sensitive and say what we
We'll just
actually
take
intend
time
to
to
say.
write it better, Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to refine that because we have an important story and we think it's important to the character, but we obviously didn't do it well. So we're going to, whatever. I think there would be some merit to that, but of course they don't pay me to write it. Well, in the last couple of minutes that we have left, anything else that you wanted to add? Anything making you nostalgic for past days, etc.?
Well, in Thanksgiving, I guess in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I am nostalgic. I'm thankful for the fact that I was able to grow up in a time I had the very first and every issue thereafter of Nintendo Power. I think gaming magazines, the fact that Electronic Gaming Monthly, if you ever were a fan or if you're old enough to have ever read an electronic EGM, and Sean Baby's articles at the end, if you don't know who that is, it's Seanbaby. Look him up. He is hilarious. And he would always write this article called "The Rest of the Crap," and it was just he was paid by EGM to play all of the worst games, and then he would do just a little paragraph blurb about each one and why they're just terrible. And he's really good at his job. It was hilarious. I miss that. I miss games that you could play on day one that were full and complete. I miss tangible games, and I think one of the things, the last thing I want to say is I miss midnight releases.
Yeah.
I miss even for World of Warcraft, the first 2 or 3 expansions, I think all the way up to Wrath of the Lich King, there was a midnight expansion release. And I went to when NCAA football was a thing. I went to get NCAA football probably in 2011 or 10 or 11. And there were some college players and professional players there to sign an autograph.
Oh, that's nice.
As you got them at midnight. So it was just, it was a different, obviously a little bit different time. It really wasn't all that long ago. But stuff like that, where you're around a bunch of other people that are excited to experience the game, even if it's on a school night or even if it's, you got work the next day, but I'm going to stay up for the next 3 hours and load this game and play it as much as I can. That was a pretty cool experience that we just don't get anymore.
I love that. Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, perfect. Well, listen, I enjoyed the conversation and the look back, and hopefully the look forward is just as positive, and we're just old fogies.
I know it, and hope, and we'll have. I think we'll end the year. We'll do one more and talk about the games that we've played and sort of what was our favorite, and sort of looking forward into 2025. That wraps up this episode of Retro Rebel Gamecast. I want to thank Amanda for this week's discussion. All the notes from this episode will be posted on our site, templeofgeek.com. If you'd like to add to the discussion or reach out with questions, sound off in the comments or email us at retrorebel@templeofgeek.com. If you like what you hear, head over to wherever you download your podcasts and subscribe so you'll be sure to get each episode as it's released. And rate us because that really helps our show. Until the next time.